Chief, can you hear me? At last. Are you alright? Can you move?
Alright, can you hear me? I'm back after a long absence. I am very sorry about that. I got caught up in things. I was kind of enthusiastic about this, but then the audio problems and such, that was a bit demoralizing and I was just a bit distracted, but now that main problem should be solved and I would like to just get back into this and show off this thing that I'm very fond of. If you don't remember where we were, don't worry. I'll cover anything important. The first level of this game that I talked over, consider that Season 0. I made a bit of a mess with the sound. Again, very sorry, but I'm hoping that this can just be something you pick up at any point. Lots to talk about. It's Halo. We're in a very nice open spot. You can read those subtitles rather than listening to me to keep up with what's happening. This is second level, whatever you want to call it, of one of my favorite games ever, Halo, and here we are on Halo, the giant space ring. We were in that cramped up spaceship. It was very neat looking, utilitarian sci-fi. Now all of a sudden we are in Red Dawn or something. It's very, very impressive, I think. On the Xbox, before on console we'd been playing GoldenEye and such, or whatever, nothing quite like this. And the closest comparison before this that comes to mind is Unreal. It's actually quite similar in the climate that we're in, among other things, rocks with forming valleys with green in the middle. It's that kind of setup. It's very nice to look at, I think. There's no reason not to do this. It's just a very good idea. It looks nice. Not many games do it. Okay, I'll stop with the stupid stock exposition like I work for IGN or something now and talk about this game like myself. So what's on my mind when I look at this? What's on my mind is this whole level that we've landed in, this whole open area feels awesome, and I feel already engaged and interested in the openness of everything that's in front of me. It's sprawling out in a way which frankly feels almost unsurpassed, even though this game is, 22 years old now or something? The thought I want to cover, there are a lot already. I can feel myself getting into the same spot I did with the first level. The thought that I've had on my mind is what it means for something to really be outdated or surpassed, and how many of my favorite games I think really haven't been surpassed because what they were doing was never really quantified, so nobody was really consciously trying to do it better than them. And there is one game which I think is like Halo, which I will get to. I'm mentioning it now as a kind of mental reminder to myself. So what does Halo do? I kind of said in the first level. It's a first-person shooter, if you're an idiot, but really I see it as a game that's a successor of their Myth, which is their real-time strategy game. Again, if you're a moron, you call it that, but Myth is a really unique game. It's a strategy game which is top-down, but it's about, battles between groups of guys. You don't build a base or anything. It's just about crashing guys into guys in a 3D environment, and it's all very physically determined results. Things bounce, things fly through the air, and it's much like in this game, things fly through the air, bounce, and have effects based on where they land. Now, speaking of effects, let me show you something. I throw that there, and look, everything kind of bounces in that fun, entertaining way. That's very Halo. Everything kind of flies in a very slow, almost wuxia-like way where... that's how I would describe Bungie physics, where if you listen to Jackie Chan talk about making action movies, it's a similar kind of logic there with how things work in movies and how they should in games and would if they weren't mostly made by morons, where, how something feels is not, it does not scale with reality, and there is a kind of way to stylize the way that the elements of the world work, which is not unrealistic. Instead, it kind of brings out the truth of something, in this case, physicality. To make something feel real, you don't make it get thrown, realistically from the force of a blast. It gets, like in wuxia, people get punched and they fly away, As an observer, that extra... that just extra feedback of things happening, you're taking it in with your eyes, you aren't the one fighting, but you experience that fight through your eyes, and, everything is very visually amplified so that you get as much of an experience as possible. It's kind of similar here where, video games, that's something that doesn't get talked about much. It really is kind of primarily a video that is visual medium, and, feedback being exaggerated visually is one very big deal, and the other is that certain objects, when they fly around, actually do have a kind of gameplay, I hate the word, but it kind of fits, result where things can fly into each other and influence each other, especially grenades set off grenades on the ground and so on, and chain reactions and things like that. There is a kind of the physicality of this game is very exaggerated in a way which feels like wuxia in every way. There'll be something I'll be able to show you later which really brings that out. Now, that got a bit sidetracked. Other Halo things just on my mind. The ground, I point this out in a few games, is jagged if you look close at it, but something that I noticed looking at footage of Horizon Forbidden West lately, which I contrast with Death Stranding, they're made on the same engine. That's interesting to think about for this point. What's striking about Horizon Zero Dawn is that the ground is about 100 times more detailed than Halo Combat Evolved. There are no flat seams in the ground like what you can see if I get close here. But you can see here that it looks kind of like a flat concrete, like smoothed out plane, and the Master Chief moves across it like such. We just kind of skate across perfectly level ground, and that doesn't feel wrong to me. In Horizon Forbidden West, the protagonist glides just like the Master Chief, only it's from a third person's perspective, so it already looks a bit funny. And the fact that the movement is perfectly smooth across terrain, which is not, I find that to be kind of uncanny. It's a point I bring up in a few contexts. I think it scales back and forth across different situations. It's a balance of fidelity issue, I believe, where something first-person shooters of this era did really well, kind of incidentally. It was nobody's plan, but I'm just kind of showing it off by walking across this. Is this kind of era, I've been thinking of calling them the intermediate shooters, kind of running from Quake 2 to Far Cry 1, maybe. They were characterized by very tight one-to-one fidelity between the physicality of a thing and how you interacted with it. Like, every level, the whole virtual space is made out of hard 3D blocks, polygons, lines, whatever. And, everything is very much, I walk into it and I bounce off of the physical thing if it's there or it's not, and there are no superficial elements on the ground or whatever which I can, just glide over because they have no physical presence. At most, it's these pieces of grass which look so abstracted that they don't really bother me, but as well, frankly, if they were removed, I might like this more. That's just something to think about, but they don't upset me because it looks paper, I don't expect that to have a meaningful interaction with the feet of my character, but by the time we're getting ground as detailed as Horizon Zero Dawn and its sequel, where some poor Indian slave probably spent years of his life rendering all of the rocks and little tufts of fern and shrub, what is the point when it all just gets glided over like it's not there and it might as well just be a texture of grass like this? I ask because I really do wonder, and I feel bad for the guys who make those. And of course they can say, well, what do you want? That's absurd, the idea that, you can actually, trip on or have to consider a rock on the ground, but, Hideo Kojima then partners with those people, buys their game engine or the rights or whatever, and uses it to make Death Stranding, and it's probably the first game I've played which actually takes this into account, exactly what I was talking about. Exactly the same level of ground under the protagonist's feet, only in that game, Norman Reedus is actually physically interacting with every rock. Yes, in his animations, his foot is, adjusted so he steps over a little rock in front of him or whatever, but, if you just try to, power through that, he can actually trip. The highly detailed one-to-one movements of his feet over the terrain are actually modeled to the point where he can catch his toe on something and fall, and I think that's absolutely incredible. It's no question that it's the most thoughtful and detailed walking in a game, and yes, that's one thing, but the more important point I think is it's the first game to actually make worthwhile use of having ground more detailed than what I'm looking at right now, this little repeating texture of grass which Bungie just pasted across this flat plane, which is the earth we are walking across right now. Yes, so... Okay, we're out of IGN mode. This is very much me speaking like myself now. Aren't you having fun hearing thoughts about ground? Well, it really is what excites me about this game. It's such a brilliantly faithful, three-dimensional world, and you interact with it in such tight ways. No one really tries to quantify or explain this, and I really do think it's a lot of the joy of video games. To me, this is what it's all about, just this brilliant level of visceral fluidity and fidelity in navigating a three-dimensional space. And we haven't even really talked about what's in it yet. If I actually cut in a moment, I will talk about the staging of this nice little scene Bungie put together of these unfortunate guys we were with, this weird environment we are in, that strange Starship Troopers, Plasma Bolt, and so on. I'm having a great time, and I'm just going to upload this, I think, to get back into the swing of things. I'll cut here and see you again in a minute.